Have you ever stopped to wonder how that sandwich you had for lunch is actually powering your brain right now? Well, today we are diving deep inside your cells to look at the microscopic engine that makes it all happen. This is the amazing story of cellular respiration.
You know that feeling, right? When you get super hungry and you just feel sluggish, maybe a little dizzy, kind of weak? Yeah, that's not just in your head. It's a real physical signal from your body telling you, hey, the fuel tanks are running on empty. Now, the food we eat is packed with energy. I mean, a single gram of sugar has thousands of calories, but our cells are way too smart to just set it on fire like a marshmallow. Imagine that. A sudden burst of heat and light inside you would be, well, chaotic and super wasteful. Instead, our bodies have this incredibly elegant system to release that energy, little by little.
So how exactly do our cells pull this off? How do they unlock that energy in such a controlled way? Let's get into the fundamental link between the food on your plate and the actual fuel that powers every single thing you do. Okay, so the secret ingredient, the star of the show, is a molecule called ATP. That stands for adenosine triphosphate. Think of it as the universal energy currency for all life on Earth. Just like you need cash to buy things at a store, your cells need to spend ATP to do literally anything, from contracting a muscle to firing a neuron in your brain. No ATP, no action. Simple as that.
And here's the best way to think about it. Imagine ATP is a fully charged battery, ready to go. When a cell needs to do some work, it uses up some of that power, and the battery becomes ADP, kind of like a partially charged battery. The entire point of cellular respiration is to take that used-up ADP and recharge it, turning it back into a powerful, fully loaded ATP molecule that's ready to work again. And that whole recharging process, that is cellular respiration. It's this brilliant, multi-step pathway that carefully extracts the energy locked away in our food, like glucose, and uses it to jam that last phosphate back onto ADP, turning it back into the high-energy ATP our cells need to live.
And if we zoom way out, you can see how this all fits into the bigger picture on our planet. Photosynthesis, that's what plants do, is like making a deposit into Earth's energy bank. It uses sunlight to store energy. And cellular respiration? That's the withdrawal, releasing that same energy for pretty much all living things to use. They're really just two sides of the exact same coin.
All right, so how does this energy withdrawal actually work? Let's take a little trip. We're going to step inside the microscopic factory that exists inside every single one of your cells and see the energy assembly line in action.
So our little cellular factory here has three main departments. It all kicks off in glycolysis, which we can call the splitting room. From there, the pieces move on to the Krebs cycle. Think of that as the processing core. And it all wraps up at the electron transport chain. That's the main power station. And trust me, that's where the real magic happens.
First stop, glycolysis. The name literally means sugar breaking. This part happens out in the cell's main workspace, the cytoplasm. And get this, it doesn't need any oxygen at all. A single glucose molecule gets split right in two. It's a really fast process, and it gives us a small but immediate profit of 2 ATP molecules. Next up, those two smaller molecules headed into the cell's powerhouse, the mitochondrion, to enter the Krebs cycle. In here, they get broken down even further, piece by piece. This process releases the carbon dioxide that you eventually breathe out, and it captures a whole bunch of high-energy electrons. This stage also adds another 2 ATP to our growing total.
So let's do the math. So far, we've only made a grand total of 4 ATP. The real, massive payoff comes in the final stage, the electron transport chain. This is where those high-energy electrons we just captured get put to work. They, along with the oxygen we breathe in, power this incredible ATP-generating machine. And that right there is why oxygen is absolutely non-negotiable for complex life.
So, the big question is, after all 3 stages, what's the grand total? How many of those ATP batteries can we charge from just one single molecule of glucose? The answer is about 36 molecules of ATP. That is incredible. It's an 18-fold increase over what we got from just that first step. And to put that into perspective, this whole process captures about 36% of the total energy available in glucose. That makes your cells way more efficient than a typical car engine, which only manages to convert about 20% of the energy in gasoline into motion.
But what happens if that key ingredient for the main power station, oxygen, isn't around? What if you're in a situation where there's not enough oxygen to go around? Can the cell still make any energy?
Well, yes, it can, thanks to a backup plan called fermentation.
Now, this is an anaerobic process, which just means without oxygen. Fermentation itself doesn't really produce much ATP. Its main job, its crucial job, is to recycle some key molecules so that glycolysis, that first step, can keep on churning out its small but vital supply of ATP when oxygen is scarce.
And there are two main types of fermentation you probably already know. First, there's alcoholic fermentation. This is what yeast uses to produce the alcohol in beer and wine, and it's what makes those CO2 bubbles that help bread rise. Then you've got lactic acid fermentation. This is used by bacteria to bake things like cheese and yogurt. And it's used by your own muscles when you're exercising so hard that you can't get enough oxygen to them.
As you can see from this diagram, both of these pathways have the exact same goal. They take the byproducts from glycolysis and they recycle them, making sure that that initial sugar-splitting process can keep going. It's a really vital, short-term fix to keep at least some energy flowing when the main power station is offline.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of the biology. Now let's connect all this back to the real world. Let's take a look at how our bodies actually use these different energy systems when we exercise.
So think about the huge difference between a swimmer sprinting a 50-meter race and a huge crowd of runners competing in a marathon. I mean, both sets of athletes are pushing their bodies to the absolute limit, but they're relying on fundamentally different energy pathways to get the job done.
During a short, all-out sprint, your muscles burn through whatever ATP they have stored up in just a matter of seconds. To get more energy that fast, they switch over to lactic acid fermentation. It provides a massive burst of power, but it's not sustainable. This anaerobic sprint creates what's called an oxygen debt that your body has to repay later. And that's exactly why you're still gasping for air long after you've crossed the finish line. Now, for any kind of exercise that lasts longer than about 90 seconds, like a marathon, fermentation just can't keep up. For the long haul, cellular respiration is the only game in town. It's a much slower process, sure, but it's way more efficient and sustainable, burning through your body's stored carbohydrates and then fats for hours and hours on end.
And one of our sources really just sums it up perfectly. For those short, explosive bursts of energy, the body uses the ATP it already has on hand, plus the ATP it can make really fast through lactic acid fermentation. It's basically like your body's built-in turbo boost.
So the next time you eat a meal, or even just take a deep breath, just take a second and remember what's actually happening inside of you. Every single breath you take is delivering oxygen to trillions of tiny cellular factories, all working around the clock to turn your food into fuel. So the only real question left is, what are you going to power with all that energy?